5 minutes later, they were marching up the hill, broomsticks over their shoulders. They had asked Percy at mealtime so far. He had said he was busy. Harry had only seen Percy at their room in the rest time. Wish I knew what he's up to. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 4, at Flourish and Blots. Life at the Burrow was as different as possible from life on Private Drive. The Dursleys liked everything neat and ordered. The Weasleys' house burst with the strange and unexpected. Harry got a shock the first time he looked in the mirror over the kitchen mantelpiece, and it shouted, "Tuck your shirt in, Scruffy!" The girl in the attic called and dropped pipes whenever he felt things were getting too quiet, and small explosions from Fred and George's bedroom were considered perfectly normal. What Harry found most unusual about life at Ron's, however, wasn't the talking mirror or the clanking girl. It was the fact that everybody there seemed to like him. Mrs. Weasley fussed over the state of his socks and tried to force him to eat 4 helpings at every meal. Mr. Weasley liked Harry to sit next to him at the dinner table so that he could bombard him with questions about life with Muggles, asking him to explain how things like clocks and the postal service worked. "Fascinating," he would say as Harry talked him through using a telephone. "Ingenious, really. How many ways Muggles have found of getting along without magic." Harry heard from Hogwarts one sunny morning about a week after he had arrived at the Burrows. He and Ron went to the breakfast to find Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Ginny already sitting at the kitchen table. The moment she saw Harry, Ginny accidentally knocked her porridge bowl to the floor with a loud clatter. Ginny seemed to very prone to knocking things over whenever Harry entered a room. She dived under the table to retrieve the bowl and emerged with her face glowing like the setting sun. Pretending he hadn't noticed this, Harry sat down and took the toast Mrs. Weasley offered him. "Letters from school," said Mr. Weasley, passing Harry and Ron identical envelopes of yellowish parchment addressed in green ink. "Dumbledore already knew you were here, Harry. Don't miss a trick, that man. You two've got them too," he added, as Fred and George ambled in still in their pajamas. For a few minutes there was silence as they all read their letters. Harry told him to catch the Hogwarts Express as usual from King's Cross Station on September 1st. There was also a list of the new books he needed for the coming year. Second year, students will require the Standard Book of Spell, Grade 2, by Miranda Goldschrock, Break with a Banshee by Gilderoy Lockhart, Gating with Gauls by Gilderoy Lockhart, Holiday with Hacks by Gilderoy Lockhart, Travel with Trolls by Gilderoy Lockhart, Voyage with Vampires by Gilderoy Lockhart, Wandering with Werewolves by Gilderoy Lockhart, Ear with the Yeti by Gilderoy Lockhart. Fred, who had finished his own list, peered over at Harry's. "You've been told to get Lockhart's book too," he said. "The new Defense Against the Dark art teacher must be a fan, but it's a witch. At this point, Fred caught his mother's eye and quickly buzzed himself with the marmalade. That lot won't come cheap, said George, with a quick look at his parents. Locust books are very expensive. Well, we'll manage, said Mrs. Weasley, but she looked worried. I expect we'll be able to pick up a lot of Ginny's things second-hand. Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year? Harry asked Ginny. She nodded, blushing to the roots of her flaming hair, and put her elbows into her butter dish. Fortunately, no one saw this was already dressed. Except Harry, because just then Ron's elder brother Percy walked in. He was already dressed, his Hogwarts perfect badge pinned to his sweater vest. Morning all, said Percy briskly. Lovely day. He sat down in the only remaining chair, but leaped up again almost immediately, pulling from underneath him a molten gray feather dust. At least, that was what Harry thought it was. Still, he saw that in the breath. Arrow, said Ron, taking the limp owl from Percy and tearing a letter from under its wing. Finally, he got Hermione's answer. I wrote to her, saying we were going to try and rescue you from the Dursleys. He carried Errol to a patch just inside the back door and tried to stand him on it. But Errol flopped straight off again, so Ron laid him on the draining board instead, muttering, pathetic. Then he ripped open Hermione's letter and read it out loud. Dear Ron and Harry, if you're there, I hope everything went all right and that Harry's okay and that you didn't do anything illegal to get him out, Ron, because that would get Harry into trouble too. I've been really worried, and if Harry is all right, will you please let me know at once? But perhaps it would be better if you use a different owl, because I think another delivery might finish your one off. I'm very busy with schoolwork, of course. How can she be? Said Ron in horror. We're on vacation. And we're going to London next Wednesday to buy my new books. Why don't you meet in Diagonally? Let me know what's happening as soon as you can, laughed Hermione. Well, that fits it nicely. We can go and get all your things done too, said Mrs. Weasley, stirring to clear the table. What are you all up to today? Harry, Ron, and Fred and George were planning to go up the hill to a small paddock the Weasleys owned. It was surrounded by trees that blocked it from view of the village below, meaning that they could practice Quidditch there, as long as they didn't fly too high. They couldn't use real Quidditch balls, which would have been hard to explain if they had escaped and flown away over the village. Instead, they threw apples for one another to catch. They took turns riding Harry's Nimbus 2000s, which was easily the best broom. Ron's old shooting star was often outstripped by passing butterflies. Harry had only seen Percy a mean time so far. He stayed shut in his room the rest of the time. Wish I knew what he's up to, said Fred, frowning. He snored himself. His exam results came the day before you did, 12 hours, and he hardly got it at all. Ordinary wizarding levels, George explained, seeing Harry's puzzled look. Bill got 12 too. If we're not careful, we'll have another hair boy in the family. I don't think I could stand this shame. Bill was the oldest Weasley brothers. He and the next brother Charlie had already left Hogwarts. Harry had never met either of them, but knew that Charlie was in Romania studying dragons and Bill in Egypt working for the Wizard Bank Gringotts. Don't know how Mom and Dad are going to afford all our school stuff this year, said George after a while. 5 sets of Lockhart's book, and Ginny needs a robe and a wand and everything. Harry said nothing. He felt a bit awkward. Stored in the underground vaults at Gringotts in London was a small fortune that his parents had left him. Of course, it was only in the Wizarding World that he had money. You could ask scallions, you couldn't use scallions, seagulls, and nuts in Muggles' shops. He had never mentioned his Gringotts bank account to the Dursleys. He didn't think their horror or anything connected with magic was stretched to a large pile of gold. Mrs. Weasley woke them early the following Wednesday. After a quick half-a-dozen bacon sandwich each, they pulled off their coats, and Mrs. Weasley took a flower pot off the kitchen mantelpiece and peered inside. We're running low, Arthur, she sighed. We'll have to buy some more today. Oh, well, guess first, after you, Harry dear. And she offered him the flower pot. Harry stared at them, all watching him. What am I supposed to do? He stammered. He's never troubled by blue powder, said Ron sadly. Sorry, Harry, I forgot. Never, said Mrs. Weasley. But how did you get to Diagon Alley to buy your school stuff last year? I went on the underground. Really? Said Mr. Weasley eagerly. Were there escapers? How exactly? No, Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Blue powder's a lot quicker, dear, but goodness me, if you've never used it before. He'll be all right, Mom, said Fred. Harry, watch us first. He took a pinch of glittering powders off the flower pot, stepped up to the fire, and threw the powders into the flames. With a roar, the fire turned emerald green and rose higher than Fred, who stepped right into it, shouted, Diagon Alley, and vanished. You must speak clearly, dear, Mrs. Weasley told Harry as George dipped his hand into the flower pot. And be sure to get out at the right grate. The right what? Harry said nervously as the fire roared and whipped George out of sight too. Well, there is an awful lot of wizard fires to choose from, you know, but as long as you've been spoken clearly, you'll be fine, Molly. Don't fuse, said Mr. Weasley, helping himself to blue powder too. But dear, if he's got lost, how would we be ever explain to his aunt and uncle? They wouldn't mind, Harry reassured her. Dudley would think it's a brilliant joke if I got lost up a chimney. Don't worry about that. Well, all right, you got after Arthur, said Mrs. Weasley. Now, when you get into the fire, say where you're going, and keep your elbows tucked in, Ron advised. And your eyes shut, said Mrs. Weasley. The suit? Don't fidget, said Ron. You might well fall out the wrong fireplace. But don't panic and get out too early. Wait until you see Fred and George.